Welcome back to another episode of Malvo Talks. This episode is going to close out my series for Black History Month. I'm going to try to get it done in 2 episodes, hopefully. But this episode is going to be on the origins of the Emperor Haile Selassie. And this is more in the vein of global African history. And the reason why I'm doing this episode is because when I was growing up, there were no biographies, I'll put it that way, on the Emperor Haile Selassie that were accessible. And so hopefully this will bring clarity and illumination to something that, while the Emperor Haile Selassie is well known in terms of Africans in the diaspora and in the continent and globally, you don't get a lot of information, and I want something here more so than what's on Wikipedia. So let's get right into it. Now, first we have to just take some time to talk about the history of Ethiopia proper. And officially, it's a collection of smaller kingdoms and a confederation. So that the Empire of Abyssinia, which is what Ethiopia is officially called, is an ancient conglomeration of states and entities, and its genesis is out of biblical times because it was from the biblical Queen of Sheba, Queen Makeda, who in her pilgrimage to Jerusalem to test the knowledge of Solomon, that turned into a liaison. And the issue of that liaison was the Emperor Menelik. And it is from him that the Empire of Abyssinia really takes root. And just as an aside, it is also from that liaison and contact that the Black Jews, the so-called Black Jews, trace their own lineage, because after the fall of Solomon's temple, the refugees, a segment of Jewish refugees, fled to Ethiopia and the protection of the Emperor Menelik. And this is why the Ethiopian Jews, the Black Jews, take precedence over the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic, because they have a longer history, a longer heritage, a longer lineage that is unbroken. Whereas the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic, they come from the diaspora that happened after 70, with the fall of the temple at the hands of the Romans, undiminished, all the way to this present day. And the recent history, which is where the origins of Haile Selassie is, starts in the late 19th century, particularly after the Battle of Ottawa. But it is in 1892 that Tafari Makonnen is born, and that is Haile Selassie. And Haile Selassie, that's his baptismal name. But in terms of royalty in Ethiopia, you have 2 names. You have the baptismal name, and then you have the name which is to have to do with the royal identity and the dynastic tie. And there, in that frame of mind, until he becomes emperor, he would be known Haile Selassie, would be known as Tafari Makonnen. And because of the paternalistic society that Ethiopia was, you took the name of your father. His father was Makonnen Wolde Mikael. And Makonnen Wolde Mikael was the ruler of Harare. And Harare was a former Muslim principality. And it had recently been taken over. And the other important thing about Tafari Makonnen's father was that he was one of the principal generals in Menelik II's army. And indeed, Menelik II was his cousin. And as the story goes, in the Battle of Ottawa, which all people of color should know because it ended the Italian prospects of building a colonial empire by annexing Ethiopia. They had gotten as far as Eritrea and then were abruptly stopped by the Ethiopian war machine. And in that battle of Ottawa, the father of Tafari Makonnen, wounded, was able to lead his infantry to victory. And that created the status of his heroic anima. And it was with that kind of aura and that kind of charisma that Tafari himself would inherit. Now, his mother, who was a Wollo princess, she came from one of the configuring kingdoms of Abyssinia, Wollo, the Wollo kingdom. But she was a princess, and she, Princess Yeshime was her name, but she died of childbirth in 1894. And because Makonnen had been married before Tafari was born, and there was an older brother called Yelma, Ras Yelma, and so this would be the main succession line in terms of that branch of royalty.